So my headline today is an opinion article from Newsweek by Howard Kessler. Easier access to pot may revolutionize healthcare for seniors. Almost 80,000 Americans will turn 65 this week. That's not just a lot, it's record breaking. Over the next 4 years, more people will turn 65 annually than ever before, representing the biggest surge in retirement age Americans in history. While 4.1 million Americans enter their golden years by the end of 2027, we will see a massive jump in demand for advanced medical care and enrollments in Medicare. To suggest that this may get messy is an understatement. We need to radically rethink the senior healthcare landscape, and we need to do it now. The DEA and the Biden administration announcement last week crystallizes the opportunity sooner than later. Almost all the commentary around the announcement focused on Biden securing the youth vote for the elections. What about the over 65-year vote? By scheduling marijuana, we can incorporate medical cannabis into the comprehensive care of older Americans. Seniors are already the fastest growing group of cannabis users in the United States. Many are already using cannabis as a transformative solution for chronic pain, anxiety, insomnia, depression, nausea, from chemotherapy and neurodegenerative disorders like dementia, Parkinson's, and Alzheimer's. Amidst rising healthcare costs, the Medicare population is facing cuts in health benefits. We need a fundamental overhaul of the senior healthcare landscape. Seniors have the highest healthcare costs and rates of hospitalizations, and nearly 1/3 take 5 or more pharmaceuticals every day. In a study conducted at a senior living facility in Florida, where medical cannabis was administered, more than 80% showed a positive impact, and 3/4 said that cannabis was more cost effective than prescription drugs. In states where cannabis is legal, doctors prescribe an average of 1,826 fewer painkillers per year, which would result in a cost savings of up to $500 million per year. The disruptive potential of medical cannabis can't be understated. Yet, the path to reach the potential is peppered with hurdles. Integrating medical cannabis into senior healthcare programs requires establishing a demonstration program in a state that allows medical cannabis. The demonstration could implement a systematic approach and gather real-world data over the next several months on the diagnosis, usage pattern, dosing protocols, and efficacy of medical cannabis among their senior demographic. This demonstration is the seed that will sprout potential not only to disrupt the current medical cannabis system, but revolutionize the senior healthcare landscape. But the clock is ticking, and the need for healthcare transformation is now. And soaring costs and a growing desire to shift away from traditional pharmaceuticals, medical cannabis is poised to usher in that transformation. So what do you think? Is this why Schedule 3 has folks nervous? Or do you think Schedule 3 is the start of a revolution to put medical cannabis in Medicare? This is Dr. Jean Talleyrand with High at 9 News.
Well, Dr. T, I think Schedule 3 is basically just like you said, it's going to give the pharmaceutical industry the edge on cannabis, and it's going to leave everybody that's been in cannabis far, far, far in the dust.
I have to say the pharmaceutical industry has had the edge on cannabis for almost 50 years. They can study it.
Mm-hmm.
But they just choose to study it at one single agent at a time.
Well, that's how they operate, though, because they only operate in single compounds, right?
Yeah. But they've lost their edge because, meanwhile, we're now studying the plant, and they haven't been able to shift to that paradigm yet. So,
well, it's like trying to fit a round peg in a square hole with that, though, Dr. T. It's like they don't do that. They never have. So expecting them to advance themselves into that, I think is just well wishes.
Right. But what I think the point of the article is that should the cannabis industry pivot toward focusing on grandma and getting grandma some some standardized cannabis-based products and having the government, Medicare, pay for these products. I mean, this could solve a lot of dispensary.
I don't think Medicare is ever going to pay for products, even on a Schedule III status. Because in order for Medicare to pay for that, that would mean that a company would be putting one of their products through a whole FDA trial to make it FDA approved for over-the-counter sales. And I don't see any cannabis companies that are going to have the money to do that, nor the 5, 10, 15 years that it takes to get that accomplished.
We would have to convince the FDA that cannabis has a separate track. That's the
You're not going to convince them of that.
Well, at some point, we just have to have an alternate clinical track for FDA trials that includes full spectrum, whole plant, whole fungi ingredients, as well as.
But that goes against their whole five character guidelines for how
right. But that's why it would be
drugs.
That's why it would be a new clinical path, because it would have to actually establish new guidelines, and there would have to be a new path that is not like the current.
You guys are
discrete molecule path, and it is doable. What it would take would be lobbying money.
If you think you're going to
millions of dollars to pay off our government representatives, basically de facto bribe them to get.
If you think that you guys are going to teach the federal government, which I would consider the old dog in this analogy, a new trick, I think you guys are barking up the wrong tree.
Well, so consider the biosimilars. Consider the antibodies that we're giving in the 1980s. There was no track for the antibodies. They don't fit in the normal small molecule track. Antibodies are large protein molecules with multiple variable characteristics. Does that sound familiar? Mm-hmm. Similar to cannabis botanical. And we were able to teach the FDA, we meaning the scientists, were able to teach the FDA how to handle antibodies. And now you see them advertised everywhere, and they've got their own special tract for biosimilars. Mm-hmm. So it's been done before. It was done with pharma money, right? But it was done before.
Interesting. But what year?
I think they have to have a dog in the fight, right? So by putting cannabis in the Schedule III and making them basically the legal purveyors and producers and dispensers of cannabis, now they have a dog in the fight. Now they can use their lobbying dollars to do exactly what Jean said, which is create an alternate pathway. Like the antibody example is a great example about how the FDA has to be able to evolve their thinking beyond single monomolecular medicine, which is, okay, there's a tablet of aspirin, right? It's aspirin and starch, just aspirin, right? Well, what we know from botanicals, if the cannabis plant teaches us anything, it teaches us this entourage or ensemble effect, which is greater than the activity of the single ingredient. So I think, Jean, you're absolutely spot on correct. They can do this, but I think that they need a commercial dog in the fight. So maybe that's what Big Pharma will do when this thing gets put in the Schedule III.
Most likely pharmaceutical companies won't try to push for it and the antibody track is actually a great imperative. The reason they push for the antibodies is because they're monoclonal antibodies. They're antibodies that they've actually used CRISPR and other technologies to alter and thereby able to win a patent on them. So then they can invest the $40 to $50 million in that antibody treatment, give it a specific name, and funnel all the profits. I'm seeing that with my son with Ocrevus, Simpta, and all these drugs which are monoclonal antibodies. Mm-hmm. And so we're going to have to continue as a polity, as a community, find ways to lobby our government in order to get these therapies that are not patentable pushed forward on a manner. Mm-hmm. I think.
So be able to patent a multi-agent product. It's just what's the magic formula and what's the level of variability in it. So they're right around the corner. We're definitely in a race for sure.
Dr.
I know you can patent a cannabis plant. I think if it's less than 1% of the seeds come out with any variants. If you basically have to get like 15 plus generations in, and you can get them to a point where they replicate, and that's how they do it with other patented agricultural seeds. So I guess it is possible.
Dr. T, what year did they legalize those or allow for all of those antibody treatments?
Let's see, monoclonal antibodies was just coming out. The idea was just coming out in the late 80s. So that's when science was.
Wasn't this in part done because these antibodies were helping people who were suffering from HIV and AIDS?
No, it was just, we're just learning about antibodies and how they were these amazing proteins that, had this ability to attach to things, and we could change what it attached to, and then had also a natural ability to attach to the cells. So, we were just learning that in the 1980s. It was really, discovering empirical science.
Okay.
And then we realized, wow, we can attach things to those antibodies and they can sort of be like a seek and destroy missile, find the bad cells and destroy them. And so that's where we got the cancer chemotherapy and everything else came from that.
Got it. Thank you all so much for this. This was fantastic. We're going to go to a commercial and we are going to be right back.